Right, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Monday, what is it? The 29th of April. Yeah, sure. Not 28th April. Well, April, March, what's the difference? Half full, half empty. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. We're here just another day. Yeah, another day, another discussion. Wisdom chats. Here we are. So, glass jars. Was it glass jars or glasses? Half full, half empty. Rocks, stones, sand, and some of us had beer, some of us had water. It depends which way you swing on that one, I suppose. But Ed, I think we better hand this one over to you to kick off, because I think you're the one who picked up on the topic, and let's find out, is your jar half full or half empty or just overflowing?
Oh, I thought Lee normally led off. I don't want to step on her toes.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult to step on her toes 6,000 miles away. You've got very long legs, but
okay. Yeah. The whole thing arose from this whole thing about cup half full, cup half empty, and what's it really mean? Because for me, a half empty cup is a good thing, because it means I've had the first half and I've still got the other half to go. Half full means I only get half a cup. But then it made me think about that story around the professor in front of a load of business people, and he filled a glass jar with big stones, and he said, "Is it full?" And they said yes. And then he put some smaller stones in and sort of shook it about and said, "Is it full?" And then they said yes. And then he put some sand in and shook it about, and but the whole point of the story isn't that you can always get more in. The real point of the story is, if you put the sand or the small stones in first, you can get less big rocks in. So his whole point was, always get the big rocks in your life first. Otherwise, the small stuff, the gritty stuff, and sand's annoyingly gritty. If you ever run through a desert and you got sand in your shoe, you know how annoying the damn thing stuff is. And also, if you're trying to run through sand, it is really energy sapping. And I think that's the same with the small stuff in life, isn't it? It's energy sapping. So you haven't got time for the big stuff. And I remember my senior partner in one of the accountancy practices I was in, he kind of didn't make time for the big stuff because he was too busy doing the little stuff. And he suddenly got close to retirement age and realized his kids had left home and he didn't really know who they were. And they both gone off the tracks a bit. He didn't really know who his wife was. He didn't have anything to do because he'd been too busy just doing work and playing golf with people he needed to play golf with to get work, not because he liked them. He didn't really do anything other than pursue building the practice up. And then, well, what had he got left in his life? He hadn't looked at the big rocks. And I think it was the same for me at one point in time. I suddenly realized that my life was full of sand, because people would say, "Oh, Edward, you're an accountant. Could you audit the parish council books? And, oh, could you do this for the school? And could you do this for this club and that club and so, and this charity and this?" And all these bits of sand and bits of grit were getting in the way of me doing the big stuff. And it wasn't until I got rid of all that sand that I managed to go and do the big stuff and realize what the big stuff was. And for me, the big stuff is my two girls. It was my wife, but she decided she wasn't my big stuff, or my bigger stuff, or whatever. And traveling. And now I focus everything around my big stuff, and then all the little stuff has to fit in what I want it to. But I think the other thing about the whole analogy that struck me was, for me, rocks can look very pretty. So when they're there in that glass jar, you can see the rocks, and the space in between makes interesting patterns, doesn't it? And it looks nice. And then you put the little rocks in, and it kind of obscures the view a bit and fills those white spaces in. And then you put the sand in, and it just becomes grey and, well, not grey, but whatever colour you like to describe sand as, orangey. Sand color, and then it obscures everything, really. It masks all that beauty. So I think there's a lot to be had out of that thing of putting those stones in that jar. And yes, it is the story that you could always put more in, smaller stuff can go in. But if you put the smaller stuff in first, you're blocking out some big stuff. So always leave room in your jar for something extra, because there's bound to be something coming along that you want to put in that jar that you need space for. So that's my thoughts around it. Bit of a ramble, but I hadn't been expected to be dumped in at the deep end.
Well, that's the way we roll. Yeah, you should know that by now, Ed. Try and mix it up a little bit, and unless it's rocks and sand, you've got to get the order right there. You can't mix those up. So Jasper, you're up next. Where are your rocks and sand in your life?
Well, if all else fail, then I'll pull a Trevor on you, and I'll just talk on my own topic anyway. But based on the example that Ed led us on with the professor and his rocks, I was thinking of a similar thing, or a similar kind of story about in one of the positive books that I read way back. And I might have the material wrong, but how much is a kilogram of steel worth? And then there was a specific price for the kilogram of steel. And then it said, all right, but what if you then make nails out of the steel, and then you sell it as nails, and then the value increased? But what if you take that same kilogram of steel and you now make springs out of it? And let's say the little springs that goes into watches, when we still had the old kind of analog watches. And it went right down to say, and what would it be worth if you make these chips that goes into computer? So it's the same steel, the same material, but it's how you apply it that increase its value. I think the ultimate is nowadays with silicon chips, the origin is sand, and we walk on sand. We don't give any value to sand, but in the right hands, that become a chip. And with that chip, the ability, the computer ability in that chip can put a man on the moon, or a man in Mars, or whatever it is. So for me, it's about, I don't even want to make the issue of a glass half full or a glass half empty. It's about what do you do with the water? It's that little bit of water in there, heated up to the right degree, becomes steam, and what can you do with steam, and that kind of thinking. So it's all about applying creative thinking and thinking possibilities that I think makes the difference between we are faced with the same material around us. We are faced with the same, when you take the temperature of an economy at any given point in time, according to the measures that they measure the economy, it will tell you it's half full or half empty, or it's on the verge of a financial chasm, or whatever the case may be. And here we are 30, 40, 50 years later, still going on. And in the same economy, when things are, coming apart at the seam, there are people starting to build whole new businesses, the Elon Musks of this world, and whole new industries. So I think it's almost to put yourself in an environment where you are constantly challenged with possibility thinking, and almost have the ability not to be too stuck in seeing the now, but to be almost by faith seeing the future and starting to prepare for the future. Because coming back to computers, today you can't, when electricity is down or we can't work on our computers, we feel, all right, I can't work. It's like my whole productivity has come to a standstill because of how computers have taken over. And yet 30, 40 years ago, nobody did even know how to use a computer. So so I'll leave it at that. So I think for me, I flipped it. I said, don't talk about the glass half empty, half full, but talk about how do you deal with what you are presented with.
Great, thanks, Jasper. Yeah, I think that was a very good flip. So like that, what do you do with the resources that are available to you, whether they rock, stone, sand, or water? Yeah, nice application. So, right, I think we'll pop across to Lee now. So you've had a chance to wake up and recover from your weekend, hopefully, but hopefully you're jar was overflowing from all the people you had around you over the weekend?
So this, ladies and gentlemen, or gentlemen, let me put it that way, is a cake. And this is not a cake that you can buy, go into the shop and buy. So this was my rock that was in place for this weekend, which is family, you know. So family, that's definitely been a rock that I put in place many, many, many years ago. And it's almost the central rock. There are other rocks, and I've learned to add self-care in there. I've learned to and then certain aspects of work. When I say certain aspects of work, there are little stones about work, but there are some big things. So our wisdom's chats for me is a rock. It's in place. It's even my husband knows now. Like, we've got a house full of people. He says, "Okay, Lee, you can have my office," because he knows it's in place. And so there's some things that you can put in place. When I was thinking about family as a rock, though, I also know that you have to make that decision long before there's a need. So I can, family aren't in, I don't have to, in terms of time, because the rocks and the stones is about prioritization of time. So I don't have to spend all my time with my family. I don't have to find, my family don't take all of my time. There are other things that, of course, I do that makes up my life. But when there's a crisis, when there's something important, those other things, there's no question, those other things get reprioritized very quickly. And then, so then the rock, it's in place, even though it's not there constantly, if that makes any sense. But I wanted to also point out, you know, I was also had the same kind of point in mind that Edward had, that the beauty of the rocks is this space in between, and that one of the things that I don't like about that story in a way is that you can keep adding and keep adding and keep adding, and that somehow that you've got this full jar, and I've lived like that. I've definitely lived where you keep adding, and because, oh, there's a little space here that has to be filled, and there's a little space here, so that has to be filled, and that has to be with volunteer work, or making sure I've knocked on my neighbor's door, or you know, sent a message to a friend, or, you know, there's this, my mind is going the whole time trying to fill in all the little spaces, and then eventually you've got no space in yourself. And so I think there has to be, you have to allow sometimes those rocks are, yes, they're there, but needing those spaces in between the rocks. And then the last thing I want to say is to flip the whole thing, because there was a little book that came out several years ago that said, don't sweat the small stuff. And the principle of it, of course, is don't make the small stuff the big stuff. Completely get that. But my husband often says, you better sweat the small stuff. And the small stuff are things like, my daughter's just got a new laptop and she's using it for a production, and it's an outdoor production, so her laptop is now sitting completely exposed to anybody who could walk by, and just easy enough. We live in South Africa. It's in the middle of town. Off you go. And he said to her about 3 times, is your laptop insured? Is your laptop insured? And she goes, oh, Dad, you know, such a hassle. No, sweat the small stuff. You have to do those things. You have to put in your tax returns. You have to, you know, cross the T's and dot the I's. Those little, otherwise those things start to become big stuff. So that's my bits and pieces on the jar and so on.
Great, thanks, Lee. So yeah, I see Trevor's cat is doing the rock and roll with his screen. I'm not sure how that fits into the jar, but you know, as we all know, you know, cats rule the world. So it's telling you what to do and how to do it and when to do it. I suppose that's some of the challenges we face, Trevor. So yeah, how does your jar rock?
So Lee, I've got to apologize. I'll have to concede that I could not have bought one of those cakes off the shelf. And well done. Obviously, that was key to your weekend and your year. That was fantastic. Now, Lee, as you were talking, and also Jasper, and what's that other guy's name in the UK? I can't remember. I think his name is Ed. You know, as all of you were talking, I thought, no, man, that wasn't the topic at all. And I just wrote down here, just based on listening to you guys, there's a counterpoint to everything. I don't believe anyone can make a statement with in a room full of, let's say, a couple of people without someone turning around and say, you know, I absolutely disagree. And I must say, I think I've got a counterpoint to everything I've ever heard anyone say for the last almost 70 years, because I don't agree with anyone. So my counterpoint is that little story of the rocks and stones and sand in the jar. I think it is a story of you have so much more deep inside of you to give that you actually don't understand. And I'm amazed that that guy Ed, who he jogs around deserts and that sort of thing, never cottoned on to the fact that when you run in these long distance races, you throw in all your energy into the jar and you turn around after, well, for me, it used to be I used to hit the wall on a 90-kilometer race. I would hit the wall at about 14 kilometers. Which makes a remainder quite a long drag. And I was thinking, you know what, you give of your big substance into the jar and you're putting it in and you get to, for me, between 14 to 21 kilometers. Geez, I can't do it anymore. And then you throw a little bit more into the jar and you get to about 32 odd kilometers for me. I definitely can't do it anymore. Then you hit about 56 kilometers and say, this is crazy. And you throw in a little bit more. So for me, the metaphor of that was, you've got so much more to give. Just don't think that you've put so much of your time into this. This jar has got so much more space that you can throw into. You can hang in and you can hang in and you can hang in. So that's just a subtle little counterpoint. And then I wanted to talk about pink flying pigs, because I have the right to change the topic at any time, according to everyone on this. No, this topic of glass half full and glass half empty. I've been amazed throughout my life in the way that I've actually seen things and how people have pushed back on anything that you want to do that is out of the norm, or just pushing the envelope a little bit, to turn around to you and say, no, it can't be done, or no, I'm not interested. Where in my mind, I see these individuals turning around and effectively saying to me, there's no opportunity, the glass is half empty, and I see it completely differently. So that was my point in bringing up the glass half empty, glass half full. And I thought that Ed's initial reaction on Friday was why we couldn't get into a canoe together. Because he would want to go down that way and I would want to go this way, and the blooming canoe would be pulled apart. But now I hear that he's talking about a jar of prune pips, and what else were you talking about, Ed? And frothy beer. So the remainder of that glass story was that you could put in the froth of a beer, and I suppose that actually appeals to you. That's my point of view, if it is one.
Wow. Yeah, that could be somebody else's point of view, whether your point of view is a point of view. So yeah, so it depends on which view you're pointing at. Anyway, that's just very convoluted and unnecessary. So yeah, it is an interesting concept, isn't it? You know, and I think, you know, everybody's sort of attacked it from different angles, which is fantastic, and I think it creates scope for looking at an old saying, Ed, with new eyes from different angles, which is also very good. And what came to my mind as I was listening to Trevor ramble on there was that, you know, for me it comes down to almost the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. And if you, I won't say which one I think he was going down, but perhaps neither. But you know, if one thinks about it, you know, we can be very efficient, and that is allowing the small stuff to sweat us rather than sweating the small stuff, I think. And I think a lot of people get wrapped up in that part of the thing. So, you know, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, you know, if we're going with old sayings. And you know, the cat wandering backwards and forwards in front of your computer screen instead of paying attention to what people are saying. You know, so it's I think people get caught up in trying to be efficient rather than being effective, and for me that's where the analogy comes down to after all these discussions. So if you're being effective, you're doing the big stuff, you're doing the important stuff, you're doing the stuff that actually makes a difference. If you're being efficient, you stacking the paper nice and neatly in the corner, you're putting away in the file, you know, you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's, or, you know, dotting the T's and crossing the I's. You know, I think you wind up with crossed I's if you spend too much time on the efficiency side of the scale. You need to get effective, and I think that goes for life as a whole. You know, you can be incredibly efficient and actually achieve nothing. But if you're really effective in what you're doing, you'll achieve amazing things. And you know, maybe it won't be perfect. Maybe it won't be a very pretty 80th birthday cake, which is quite amazingly. I think that was a stunning cake. But it achieved what it needed to achieve, which is great, you know, and I think that's the point at the end of the day. So I probably rambled worse than Trevor, so you know, probably not being very effective. Yeah, so I'm going to hand it back to Lee to see whether we can find something to talk about tomorrow that is going to untangle this mess.
Well, I'm going to rescue Trevor for a change, and because one of the things that I got out of what he said is that there is more in us, that there are things that we can put, throw into what needs to happen in life. And so my question for tomorrow is, so what is in us? What's in us? What are the rocks, the things that we come with? And are they rocks, or they things that grow, or, you know, are they given? I think it's one of the questions that I actually have often wanted to say is, it seems like some people can cope better with some of the difficulties in life. And I know we've had the discussion about context and background and all the rest of it, but also, what, you know, is there something in us that's already a given, or are there some things that we can grow? So, but that's not really the point. It's what's in us that we can throw at life or put into life that makes it work for us. Does that make sense?
Okay, Lee. Yeah. Well, you know, Trevor will take the rocks out that's in his life and throw it at, you know.
And then Edward and Trevor can have their own discussion on chat about counterpoints and points and sewing and different versions of sewing. So it doesn't really matter what my topic is because they can have their own conversation.
Well, Lee, you and I will let the two old ladies stick to their crocheting and knitting, and we'll have a
Yes.
serious conversation.
Well, I always think when you're in a glass house, don't throw stones, because Lee very often pops into the chat to make points as well. So,
well, you do know
Oh,
you do know the African version of that particular story, yeah?
no,
You don't? Yeah.
No.
Well, there was this African king, and when the British came over here, and this guy saw this amazing throne that this British king was being carried around on, and he said, "No, well, I want one of those as well." So they did a deal, and then the king gave him this throne, and he took it into his grass hut, and he put it up, in the roof for safekeeping. And in the middle of the night, it broke through and fell through and crushed the king in his bed. And the moral of the story is, when in grass huts, don't stow thrones.
That was dreadful.
What can I say? All right. So on that note, we better just end this off here and see what you can throw at us tomorrow. All right. Have a good one, folks. Cheers.
thanks everyone. Bye.
Cheerio.